Today, Indo-British film collaborations like Danny Boyle's Slumdog Millionaire and Richard Attenborough's Gandhi are common. Are they products of globalization, or do they go further into the past? In what areas did Indo-British film encounters between 1930 and 1951 occur? In the 1930s, British cinema threw up two big stars from India, Merle Oberon and Sabu. Both had become international celebrities by the 1940s.
Merle Oberon was very, very beautiful. The first thing people noticed about her was her stunning good looks.
It comes across from various biographies that she was very keen to enter the film world. And Calcutta was a great place at that time because a number of Englishmen used to be there, and she used to frequent fashionable places like Furpose in Calcutta, which was a very fashionable joint, and she met a number of people, and that's where she met people from the film world and got some contacts to come over to Europe.
Merle Oberon came to London. She worked at the Café de Paris. She very much wanted to get into the movie business. She was starstruck herself, she loved movies, and she wanted to become a movie star.
The filmmaker who introduced Merle Oberon and Sabu was Alexander Korda.
Alexander Korda was unique in British cinema. He was the only equivalent in Britain of the great Hollywood moguls like the Warner Brothers and Louis B. Mayer. Like them, he was an immigrant. He was in fact a Hungarian Jew. He'd established himself as a very capable film director in Hungary, Germany, France and Hollywood, where he'd made 11 films. He came to Britain in the early 30s and set himself up as a grand producer. He became a naturalised British subject in 1936, and he set up London Films with its characteristic logo of Big Ben. And he set out to make quality films with international appeal.
Well, Alexander Korda was a very prominent British film producer of the 1930s and 1940s, and he was very committed to two things. First of all, to the idea of British cinema as an international cinema. He wanted to make big films with expensive production values that would compete with the best that Hollywood could offer in the world market. And secondly, he was very concerned with the projection of Britain, his adopted country.
Indo-British film partnerships in Britain actually began a decade before Korda, when writer-director Niranjan Pal and actor-producer Himansu Rai made 3 silent films, Light of Asia, Shiraz, and A Throw of Dice. In 1931, British filmmaker Sinclair Hill directed one of UK's earliest talking suspense thrillers, A Gentleman of Paris. Its actors, Sybil Thorndike, Arthur Wantner and Vanda Greville were also British. But its story writer was Niranjan Pal, an Indian, whose name appears in big bold letters at the start of the film. The first Indo-British talkie was Shikari.
It was made in 1932. It was an Indo-British collaboration because it had its main actors were Indian. P. Jayaraj was the hero of the film, and Sita Devi, who had acted in silent films in the 1920s in the films of Himansu Rai and Niranjan Pal, was the heroine of the film. So it was shot in India, mainly outside, and it was completed in the UK. It was edited by Thorell Dickinson, but its main actors and the story was Indian.
Thorell Dickinson, who edited Shikari, also edited Karma.
Hello, squirrel. No, don't run away. Now, stop there and tell me if you have seen a princess walking by.
In the 1930s, the film that really hit the headlines was Karma, starring Himansu Rai and his wife Devika Rani. It was the first Indo-British talking film, and it was also a bilingual film because it was made in English as well as in Hindi or Hindustani.
Karma's story writer was Diwan Sharar, an Indian from the Punjab. It was a romantic tale of an Indian prince and princess. A real princess, Sudha Rani of Burdwan, acted in it. The holy man's role was played by British theatre and film actor of Burmese Jewish origin, Abraham Sofier. It was shot in India and completed in Cricklewood's Stall Studios. Karma was the first Indo-British talkie to be launched in London. It was premiered in London's Marble Arch Pavilion and watched by a host of British and Indian VIPs. Karma created a stir wherever it was screened. It was widely covered by the British press. In Birmingham, its leading lady Devika Rani was received by the Lord Mayor and won wide acclaim. Her beauty, elegance, and English diction became talking points. Karma's music and the songs sung by Devika herself were composed by Roy Douglas of the London Symphony Orchestra. In 2008, Douglas, who was then nearing 100, wrote a letter to SACF about his Karma experience.
In the northeastern part of India is the province of Bengal. Its area is 76,843 square miles. Its population, 60 million.
Indo-British encounters also happened in documentary filmmaking. During the war, India's Ezra Mir made British war propaganda and information films on India. In the 1940s, Bimal Roy of Calcutta's New Theatres directed Teens for India for Burma Shell, a British and Dutch company, and was cameraman for Bengal Famine. The most outstanding documentary filmmaker was Hans Nieter O'Leary.
I found them fascinating. They are very beautiful films. They show this exotic, extraordinary place.
Shot in India, Nieter's Temples of India has a dance sequence depicting Lord Shiva as Nataraj, the cosmic dancer. It was specially choreographed with authentic Indian music by the Menka Indian Ballet, a company founded by Lady Menka, daughter of an English mother and an Indian father. The dancer was Pandit Ram Narayan. Nieter's documentaries are valuable. They have captured the India of the 1930s for posterity, but they have also been criticized.
I would have thought in India you would have got as angry about those films as you would have done about The Drum, because they're portraying India as a place that has this fabulous past, but it's all in the past. And it's not possible for India to go forward without Britain's help. And that's very much the view one seemed to get out of these films. So that's the problem with those films, the fact that they give a view of an India that's somehow tied to past glory.
These documentaries aimed to educate the West about the East. But the future of large-scale film collaboration lay in feature filmmaking. Here, Alexander Korda was the king. Korda had a flair for spotting talent. His choice of Merle Oberon proves this. Merle had arrived in London in 1929 with nothing except her youth and beauty. She was neither British nor white, but a foreigner and an Anglo-Indian derisively called Chichi by the British. Born in 1911 in Bombay's St. George's Hospital, she was the product of a mixed marriage between an Englishman and a woman of mixed Sri Lankan and European blood. Christened as Estelle Merle O'Brien Thompson in St. Emmanuel's Church, she spent her early years in Ketwadi, an undistinguished suburb of Bombay. It was Korda's careful planning that converted Merle from an unknown girl doing uncredited bits into a famous actress. Korda's ambitious period film, The Private Life of Henry VIII, changed her life. The role he gave her was that of Anne Boleyn. It was a landmark film for Merle, was a huge success in America, and also placed Britain on the world's film map.
This was not a small movie. This was a film which had a Hollywood-scale budget. It was a film that Korda was determined should really make his fortune. And Merle Oberon had a very small role in this film, but it was a fantastic role if you wanted to be showcased. She was playing Anne Boleyn. Very difficult to imagine a more dramatic role than that. The queen, the beautiful queen, who's going to have her head chopped off. And Merle Oberon makes absolutely the most of that part.
In many films, Merle was projected as an actress with exotic oriental looks. The 1935 film Dark Angel transformed her into a typical English rose. Korda in 1937 cast her in an ambitious period film, I, Claudius. It was a lavish production with a huge cast and fabulous sets designed by Vincent Korda. Unfortunately, this epic was not to be.
I was Alex's only star at the time, under contract to him, I mean. I had done not very much. I was very young, but they'd all been very successful. Henry VIII, The Scarlet Pimpernel, Don Juan, and then The Dark Angel with Sam Goldwyn in America, which was a very big success. And I think Alex wanted to really make me the big star. And so he bought I, Claudius, and cast Charles Lawton as Claudius, and Messalina for me. And then Alex decided that he would get von Sternberg to direct me, because von Sternberg was a woman's director. He just wanted to give me everything he could to make me shine. I had worked with Charles, knew and respected Charles as a great actor, and suddenly something very, very odd happened to him. He would come on the set every day and get made up and get dressed and then say he couldn't find his character. We were delivered by a most unfortunate thing to me, an accident. I had a motor car accident. And so they canceled the picture.
Despite rumors that her face had been permanently scarred, Merle recovered. In 1938, she appeared in Over the Moon and in a romantic comedy, The Divorce of Lady X. Merle's career kept climbing. In 1939, Korda married her. Soon, she rose to a new height when she played Cathy against Laurence Olivier in William Wyler's Wuthering Heights.
Wuthering Heights is a great example of Merle Oberon as a very accomplished movie star. You understand why she was a movie star when you see Wuthering Heights. I think it's a wonderful film because it brings together so many things. It brings together great star personalities, Merle Oberon playing opposite Laurence Olivier, but it also brings together wonderful filmmaking talent.
All along, Merle had hidden her Indian roots. Why?
The subject of miscegenation, that is interracial sex and interracial marriage, was absolutely forbidden in films. You could not depict this. And it reflected a widely held social prejudice. So the idea that one of Britain's leading producers would be married to somebody who wasn't fully white would have been social death, I would have thought.
People love the idea of hidden secrets, and that's very much the attitude that's taken to this idea of Merle Oberon hiding her origins, her mixed race origins. And I can't help feel that, in a way, it's a little bit of a storm in a teacup when you're aware of the nature of society in Britain in the 1930s. Not just Britain, but in America too. These are societies where races do not mix. These are societies where, if you want to have a successful Western movie career, you have to play, you can't afford to admit that you have mixed race origins. It's a time where we even have laws. You know, if you look at the Hollywood Code, there's one of the rules in the Hollywood Code is that miscegenation, I think is the word they use, should not be portrayed on the screen. Mixed race romances are frowned upon. They're never shown on the screen. So given that reality, what was Merle Oberon to do? Given that reality, if she wanted to have any kind of career at all as a big movie star, then she had to hide that background.
Another actor picked, nurtured and exhibited by Korda was Sabu. He was found in Mysore, where Korda had sent Robert Flaherty and Osmond Boredale to film Indian elephants. It was to be based on Rudyard Kipling's Tumai of the Elephants. Maharaja of Mysore and his Prime Minister gave them lavish hospitality. They offered them elephants and other facilities, including an unused royal palace.
Sabu stands alone. He was the only Indian star in the Western world, and he was Britain's only child star. Robert Flaherty, who was one of the leading documentarists of the age, was sent by Korda to India with more or less a free hand to make a film about the role of the elephant in Indian economy and culture. And he was going to be doing it around the story of a relationship of a boy and an elephant. And they needed a boy when they got there. And I think Flaherty actually found a boy whom he thought would do, but the cameraman, Osmond Boredale, found Sabu.
May I come with you when you take Kalanak to Pearson's shop so that I may see him, the great hunter?
Off with you. Mosh Kalanag well. You may come.
Acha! Quick, Kalanak, quick! Come on, my beautiful. We are going hunting. Up, up.
Elephant Boy was completed in England after Korda shipped Sabu to England. It was premiered in London's Leicester Square Theatre in April 1937. It was a grand success, and Sabu won accolades from all over the world.
Flaherty was trying to capture India. I think India was probably, for him, much more interesting than the Kipling story. That was what he wanted to capture, the atmosphere of this extraordinary place.
So it's a film of two halves, and what was ironic was that it received the Best Director Award at the Venice Film Festival, which was jointly therefore given to Flaherty, who really directed essentially the first half, and Zoltan Korda, who essentially directed the second half. And some of the critics denounced it for this reason, that they had adulterated the Flaherty material, which should have been a pure documentary and not become a story film. But the audiences loved it, and some of the critics loved it as well.
They say he's the greatest hunter of them all.
Korda's loyalty and devotion to Britain goaded him to make Empire films. What was the idea behind Empire films?
Korda, as a filmmaker, was looking to find epic stories, and in Britain, obviously an epic story was the Empire. So making films about the Empire was something that made sense in terms of spectacle.
I think the cinema of empire is a genre which is about the projection of, and in the early periods, the promotion of ideologies of imperialism. It tends to be films about the British Empire, although it's not only British films.
The Empire films were a personal project of Korda's. Korda was an Anglophile. He believed in the British establishment, of which he became a part when he was knighted in 1942. He believed above all in the British Empire. It appealed to him because he saw it as a vehicle for the expression of British character. That really, most of all, he saw it, the British Empire, as a force for stability, peace and order in a very disturbed world. And what you have to think about is what's happening in the 1930s in the world. America has retreated into isolationism. And he saw the British Empire as not a force for conquest or expansion or exploitation, but as a force for stability in the world, because it was a democracy, when the rest of the world is either opting out or being conquered or being dictated to.
Korda's The Drum was a classic Empire film set in India. It gave him opportunities to showcase his new find, Sabu.
Well, The Drum was the second of Korda's Indian-themed films. It was a Northwest frontier adventure epic, and we see a number of those films in the late 1930s, including from Hollywood. Gunga Din, I think, is perhaps the best point of comparison, also a controversial film in India. From a British perspective, the film is certainly promoting the idea of British rule and colonialism. It's promoting colonialism as a positive ideological project.
So drop it unless you want trouble.
I would much rather be friends with you.
Oh, so would a lot of people. Are you going to drop them sticks?
Say, please, when you speak to me.
Look at him. I can see I'm going to put my foot down. Come on, stick him up.
I cannot allow you to strike me. I am a prince.
Come on, stick him up. Oh.
Wafadar, Raja! Leave this to me. Here, take this. Now we are friends, no?
What if you put it like that?
Sabu's second film was specifically designed for him by Korda, written for him by A.E.W. Mason, the well-known novelist. Once again, a boy is at the centre of it, but this time it's a friendship between an Indian boy and an English boy, which he wanted to be a part of the film. There's no doubt at all, it's a celebration of the British Raj because it involves a British hero helping to suppress a native uprising, but a native uprising not in favour of Indian independence, but in favour of the tyranny of the native leader who is leading it, Gul Khan, who proposes to take over the state of Takot and then ravage down into India.
I think the opposition is quite understandable because although the film The Drum was very successful in the UK and the USA, it was severely opposed in various parts of India, and there were strong protests against it because it was construed to be a film that was antithetical to ideas of nationalism, which were picking up strength in India at that time. And it was sort of propagating pro-imperial ideas through the cinema of Alexander Korda. So it was perfectly justified.
If I was an Indian, I think I'd be very angry about The Drum. I think I would find it deeply patronising. I would say, I'd like to have my country, let me have my country, as a lot of people in India were saying. So, from that perspective, it's an outrageous film in some way. But, we're still in the 1930s where the empire has another, decade and a half to unravel. And I think more things are going on.
But making empire films was not feasible after World War II began. Korda turned to making grand films on exotic oriental themes where he cast Sabu in stellar roles. The most outstanding is The Thief of Baghdad. Sabu played the lovable thief Abu in this Arabian Nights Technicolor extravaganza.
Come with us on a ship of adventure to meet the Thief of Baghdad.
When I talk about Sabu, I'm a 14-year-old back in a cinema seeing Thief of Baghdad. You just fall in love with that character. On camera, he was just this magical personality. You know, you would go anywhere with him. He just had a sense of life and spirit and possibility, and the wonder of being alive. That's what comes out of a movie like Thief of Baghdad.
The Thief of Baghdad is a classic, not just for Sabu's performance. Its captivating special effects, created through the new blue screen technique, wrought magic. They have continued to inspire filmmakers to this day. Korda's Empire and Oriental films also provided opportunities to poor Indian seamen known as lascars. The lascars were used in crowd scenes of films like The Thief of Baghdad. In 1938, the numbers of lascars working in films rose so high that one of them set up a union to protect their interests. Other filmmakers also needed Indians and Orientals. In the 1920s, when Britain's Rex Ingram made his Oriental romance, The Garden of Allah, he gave an Oriental role to Sheikh Iftikhar Rasool. Rasool was a native of Multan. He came to London in 1924 and joined London's Middle Temple to study law. He lived in Woking, not far from Woking's historic Shah Jahan Mosque. In 1929, Madrid's ABC magazine wrote that Rasool played an Oriental role in Shiraz. He was also called the Rudolph Valentino of the East. Rasool wrote in a 1931 issue of Filmland that he was directing La Rouge, a film inspired by Thomas More's English poem of the same name. The same year, London's Who's Who in Filmland credited him for inventing and introducing two new forms of ballroom dance. Sadly, none of his works are traceable now. Besides acting, Indians like Diwan Sharar found work in other areas of filmmaking in UK. A graduate of Government College Lahore, Sharar had come to London in 1933. From his residence in London's posh Bloomsbury area, he established himself as a novelist and writer of English radio plays for the BBC. In 1937, his knowledge of Indian cinema was recognised when he was invited by London's prestigious East India Association to give a lecture on Indian cinema, its scope and possibilities at Caxton Hall. He became directly linked to British cinema when he was appointed Eastern Advisor to veteran British actor George Arliss. He advised Arliss in two English films, East Meets West and His Lordship.
East Meets West and His Lordship are very, very interesting films. They are films that starred George Arliss, who was one of the greatest but now most forgotten stars in cinema, both in Britain and in Hollywood. He won an Oscar in 1929 for playing Disraeli. And the film which really captured the public imagination was a film called The Green Goddess. The Green Goddess had been a huge stage success. He filmed it silent in 1923 and a talkie in 1930. And in this, he plays the Raja of Rukh, who's the ruler of a Hindu state.
In both films, Arliss was playing Oriental characters, for which he was famous. Sharar's job was to be at Arliss's elbow, making sure he did not commit any cultural faux pas. In the post-war years of decolonization and the retreat of empire, British filmmakers were pushed away from pro-imperial writers like Kipling towards authors with a different view of imperialism, the British Raj, and India. A film that typified this change was Black Narcissus, based on a story by Rumer Gooden. Directed by Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, Black Narcissus was set in the Himalayas of northern India. Sabu played a young general with British actors Flora Robson, Deborah Kerr, and Gene Simmons. Though not pro-imperial, it projected an unreal picture of India.
It wasn't a real India. It was building on the kind of empire cliches of Eastern exoticism and creating a world around that. Yet having said that, of course, the world that's created is just quite fabulous and extraordinarily achieved. And within the story, it's just terrifically done.
Soon after the retreat of empire came a film with an absolutely different ring. This was The River by French director Jean Renoir. Shot in Bengal, The River was again based on a story by Rumer Gooden. She was also involved in writing the screenplay and shooting the film. It was an international production. Though produced by an American florist, it had a high percentage of Indian investment. Indians also had valuable creative input in the film. Satyajit Ray helped and advised Renoir on appropriate locations. Some of his friends like Hari Sadhan Das Gupta, Subrata Mitra and Bansi Chandra Gupta joined Renoir's film team and were also credited for their work. Apart from American and English actors, the cast had a large number of Indians.
I saw The River a long time ago, and I remember when I saw it just being hugely affected by it. And the reason why was because I felt that I was being given a non-judgmental, true vision of India. I was in the hands of a director who was trying to discover a country rather than project an image which wasn't true. And I think that was that's why Jean Renoir is one of the world's great directors, I think, because he was non-judgmental. He had a truly inquiring spirit.
Well, Jean Renoir's film The River from 1951 is an incredibly important film, and it marks a change in the way in which Western filmmakers, important to remember that Renoir was French, represented India. It's significant, I think, for two reasons. First of all, it's not a gung-ho imperial adventure epic. It's a very down-to-earth film about people and about communities. It's a film that has no obvious plot in a conventional sense. And this was a characteristic that we see in European cinema, particularly in the Italian neo-realist movement in the late 1940s. And Renoir was perhaps influenced to a degree by that movement, focusing on real people in real social situations and filming on location, which I think is quite crucial.
I think Renoir's River is a masterpiece. It is both beautiful to look at, and it is also something which tries to interweave the experiences of three young girls growing up, experiencing first love, experiencing loss and bereavement and so forth, with the rhythms and patterns of nature. The river flows through it throughout. They created an extraordinary facsimile of India.
Satyajit Ray met and observed Renoir during the making of The River. Though he was not bowled over by the film, he regarded Renoir as his mentor. By 1955, Ray made his film debut with Pather Panchali. Like Korda's Henry VIII, this acclaimed film placed India on the world's film map.
These films are part of our shared cultural heritage, and therefore they're important for people to see. It's also important for students today to understand how filmmakers have tried to represent different cultures, and how, when we look at films over a period of time, the nature of those representations has changed. So to go back to something that's historical and that represents a very different set of values and attitudes, even if those are the prevailing values and attitudes of the time, can be quite challenging for them. But that's the value of cinema, I think. It's a fascinating insight into social mores and behaviour, understanding how people think about themselves, but also understanding how people were being perhaps even instructed to think about societies and cultures that were different from their own.